Has signed a bill into law that partially decriminalizes prostitution in Maine. The bill, as amended, eliminates the crime of engaging in prostitution and raises the solicitation of a child for commercial sexual exploitation from a Class D crime to a Class C crime. The bill also makes language changes in state law to rename the crime of patronizing prostitution of a minor or a person with a mental disability to commercial sexual exploitation of a minor or a person with a mental disability, and renames the crime of solicitation of a child to engage in prostitution to solicitation of a child for commercial sexual exploitation. The law goes into effect 90 days after the legislature adjourns.